Awesome conversation. If you've got Sean Lardo and Jennifer Bleam on the phone, my job always shifts from being like an interviewer or driving the conversation forward to kind of trying to wrangle Sean, which is like more than a full-time job. But I am super excited. We're going to bring on John in just a minute. But Sean and I wanted to talk for a couple of minutes about Pitch It. So Sean, Pitch It is your baby, and it is an incubator program, almost like a Shark Tank coaching option for smaller or startup vendors in our space. So can you give us, I'm going to put the registration link on the screen because this is an awesome option for companies that are needing to get their sea legs and really understand how to make their go-to-market play inside of our channel. But Sean, I'm going to let you speak about that, and then we're going to bring on someone special.
Sure. So, well, first, thank you for having me.
Of course.
And I'm super stoked to co-host some of these things with you over the next umpteen weeks and prepare for your event, which looks like it's going to be pretty damn good. So I'm a little envious because I can't even make it. That's the sad part. Well, I'm going to be on vacation, so I really can't be that mad. But, I'll be in Jamaica. So, I mean.
All right. I mean, I guess I'm a little grumpy with you, but yes, definitely go to Jamaica.
Right, exactly. So okay, so yeah, for those of you who know, I'm Sean Lardo, I'm ConnectWise, I'm the evangelist there for the economy. Now, Pitch It has become my baby. Last year, I took it over, where we redefined it. What Pitch It started out to be, and this will be 6 years running for it, is a ConnectWise sponsored event. It's a competition for looking for startup vendors that are very complementary to our ecosystem. And very good at working with the partners is what it boils down to. They have to be able to work with partners very easily. They have to look to be able to integrate with us. The goal, we all know the goal for years has been to figure out a way to have a one-stop shop if we can, one portal, one painted glass. The reality of that ever happening is not maybe a reality as much because there's just too many working parts, but we're trying to mitigate it, right? Now, the competition itself, like I said, is for startup vendors coming into the space and are looking for a home and a good ecosystem, a good community, which, as we all know, ConnectWise has one of the strongest communities, if not the strongest community in the space. Last year, we reinvented it a bit, and we reinvented it a bit, and we added it into a 16-week accelerator incubator program. And when we did that, we brought on people to be Cameo coaches that teach everything from mergers and acquisitions, sales and marketing, integrations, whatever else, right? And actually this year you're going to be one of the Cameo coaches, which thank you for that again.
My pleasure.
But we bring people in and it's good to even highlight you because we bring in actual practitioners. This isn't a hyperbole conversation as somebody wrote a book and said you should do these things. It's literally people in the space doing these things that have had success. So, and I was telling you guys in the green room, and I'll say this, the way I redefined and reimagined and reinvented this program was I said, March Madness is coming up. And I love March Madness. So let's figure out a way to do tournament style, which it will be because it turns into a Shark Tank. Literally, there's two phases to this. There is all the vendors that are in, go through the 6-week program. And then we work with Matt Solomon on the channel program. And we do, a couple of days of virtual live pitches where there is a voting involved with all the contestants. Last year, there were 18. We have to boil it down to 3 that can compete at Connect. So that was the March Madness portion. And then I was like, what about The Voice? And I was like, because I was watching The Voice with my mother. And like, I never watched The Voice, and my mother loves it. And she's like, you should see this great, singer. I'm like, sure. And I saw like everything they do, like Cameo coaches, head coaches, everything else. So we adopted that philosophy too. So again, Cameo coaches through the first 16 weeks where they're learning all this stuff. Not to mention, they're also able to showcase their talents by doing live streams with people like you and other communities, and work on their speak and be human. And then on the other side, the goal for them is to get down to being one of the 3 finalists. So they can compete at IT Nation Connect, where they will be assigned head coaches all through from September and October till they compete on stage live in November. Yeah, it's really good. I mean, you were there for a good bit of it. You were very supportive. Yes. That's awesome. Thank you. It's the community all doing things together. But like you saw how it was. You saw how exciting they were and how well spoken all of them were too. Their pitches were so refined. They were so good. I mean, they were better than I was.
It's so interesting because I always say, if you want to be an A player, you need to surround yourself with A players. And so that's really what you're doing. It's the epitome of rising tides, right? Like you're helping everybody get better, and then that iron sharpening iron. So that's awesome. So guys, you see the link on the screen, connectwise.com/the IT Nation/pitch it. register, get out there and throw your name in the ring and get even better. Like it's a 9 month, 8 month intensive.
Well, it ends up being okay. So you have the 16 weeks where you're in the incubator program, and if you make it to the finals, you then have the next couple months as well being involved in this stuff too, where you get the head coaching again. But you're also doing live streams and stuff to work on your speak. Everything's
Yes.
about creating the awareness, working on how you talk about things, which today's actual session is all about this too, right? About that English to English translation, and again, it's free, by the way. If I mention, it's free to apply, and if you are accepted in the program, it's free to be part of it. Other than you're dedicating your time, but you're going to get exposure and visibility in the ecosystem of ConnectWise, which
Yeah.
is humongous.
Love it. And so one of the things that you shifted inside of the Pitch It competition is that human to human,
Mhm.
showing up and not just focusing on the demo of the product, but actually getting on webinars and being a human.
Absolutely.
And that ties in perfectly with the person we want to showcase today. I want to introduce you to John Small Mountain. John is one of my sales mentors, sales coaches. He has written a phenomenal book on sales, and he's going to be speaking at my event. John, I want you to introduce your book and the subtitle of the book, because that'll tie us into what we're talking about here.
Sure. I just accidentally happen to have a copy of my book right here. So my book is called Selling from Scratch. The subtitle that we spent a lot of time on is called How to Sell More by Simply Being Human. And we were going back and forth. I get the rare opportunity of working with my partner, and so we both worked on the book a lot together. And so we were just going back and forth about what is the subtitle going to be? How do we really encapsulate how we perceive the differences, and lucked into that. And it speaks to the right lane of people. So it's been a very cool experience publishing the book and getting it out there.
And you talk about selling while still being human. Is that because so many people don't like the title of sales? Like, help me understand where that subtitle came from.
Yeah, there's a big stigma around salespeople, right? And people tend to hold on to the negative experiences and let go of the positive experiences. And and you see this stuff all over social media. People don't want to be sold, but they like to buy. And when I talk to people around what I do, we always get to the point to where they can think of 3 or 4 people that they've had business transactions with that they don't even view as salespeople, because they cared, they were very thoughtful, they took the time to really understand the situation and help them at like a human level, as opposed to, hey, shut up, I got exactly what you need, let me show you this pamphlet, kind of situation, which is where lots of people start out. But a lot of that is really finding your lane. There's a bunch of nuance and differences in different kinds of selling, right? Selling SaaS at the enterprise level is different than selling phones in a retail store, which is different than selling investments to people in a banking situation. And selling high ticket packages is different again. So there's a lane for everybody. I firmly believe that. You just have to get comfortable and maybe get some coaching and some knowledge along the way, so that way you're not having to figure it out as you're going through the conversation.
I love it. Okay, so I mentioned that John is going to be at my event. And so that's what we're also talking about today. And so we're totally breaking rules here. We're talking about 2 different call to actions, but I know everybody watching this is smart. So you can take advantage of Pitch It if that is yours, or if that's your lane, or you can take advantage of the Ultimate IT Growth Conference if you're an MSP or an MSSP, really looking for that next level and putting in a system and process around your sales and your marketing, your business development efforts. And what is cool about this conversation is you've got 3 people here who are all super comfortable being salespeople, and also very aware that being salespeople doesn't have to mean being slimy and being less than human. So, Sean, you've got pretty deep roots in this ecosystem. Did
Mhm.
you ever have to butt heads with anyone who perhaps didn't want you to sell your way, and they wanted you to sell in a little bit of a less human or maybe a little bit more slimy way than you're comfortable with?
Yes, yeah, I think it comes with the territory regardless. If you've been around long enough in this, you've experienced it, right? And I want to go back to even what John said too. When you talked about different industries that you sell in, right? There's a difference between a transactional and a relational sale, right? When you
Mhm.
go to a Verizon store, you go to McDonald's, it's transactional. They're order takers. That's what they are. There's no real, and you don't expect them to be, but it's that expectation. You
Yep.
walk in the door knowing it's retail. So you're not really expecting to, it's the difference between shopping at the Gap or shopping at a high-end boutique. You know what you're supposed to receive there, right? Also, the next part is in our world, mostly when you do higher end sales, you're the therapist first. It is, you have to ask. You can't just dive into it. And yes, Jennifer, to your question is exactly that. You know, I've been with the 5 startups I've worked with as the entrepreneur. I come in, they say, help us grow and scale. And what you find is, and happens all the time, is the CEO / entrepreneur / founder has a certain way they want to do things. And that's usually because, one, they're either overwhelmed because they're working all the different positions. So it's like what they think is the quickest way to success, or the least resistance maybe, which ends up not being true because they're working in circles then. And they may have a process they already put in place and they think that it's okay. They're like, this is great, you're going to follow our process. Now, as a sales leader or even a salesperson, the first lesson you should always know is that you should be entrepreneurial also yourself, because it is your own book of business, right? You run your own business within the business. I should be telling you as my CEO what I need from you, not the opposite. That's where you need to get to. And that's why I always fire the CEO first from this, but I understand that I have to hit certain benchmarks to make them feel at least confident enough to walk away from it, because they're supposed to be the CEO. And usually that's when you find that conflict, and that, when you get that conflict is right then they're like, why would you do that? Well, let me show me your numbers. That's what I go with always first. Show me your numbers and I'll show you where your process is failing.
I like that.
True. And I'll ask you guys both too, because you both do this. How many times have you met a CEO or the owner and you say, hey, how well are you guys doing? We're great at sales. We close 80% of our leads. They all say that. We close everything really fast. Everybody buys from us. And it's like, okay, now show me. And then when you do the math, what? It's like you do 10%.
Or they're doing 80, 90% closes, but the only lead source they have is referrals.
And they get 10 leads a year. Like, I was going to close all 10 leads this year.
Yes. 10 out of 10, man.
Exactly. So
absolutely,
you've experienced that, right? I mean, but now that's the difficult conversation. And that's back to, is it really slimy? No. Can people want to be slimy? Yes, I've seen that too before. But really, it's just a matter of education, transparency, and setting the standards that you're going to follow through with later.
So at my event, we've got even another layer of complexity to add on to that. So first we have to deal with like, okay, you are a salesperson, whether you like that naming convention or not. So we've got the whole mindset around sales, but then we have a challenge, especially if it's a technical person, if it's the owner doing the selling. Now they're going into a position where they're on one level, the salesperson are on one level, and the prospect is on another level, and they're not speaking the same language, and the salesperson may not be comfortable with sales or good at sales. And so we have this massive disconnect. So John, I know I don't need you to give your whole 45-minute chat right now, but what are some of the realities of that friction?
I think it's just very easy when you go into a new sale, a new atmosphere, a new organization, and you're learning all the greatness about what you provide. And then it's just super easy to show up as someone who's just too heavy-handed with that information, right? And so we skip discovery, we skip the important questions, right? And that might mean you're making too many assumptions, all the way up to you're completely tone deaf because you know that you got the thing that they need. Why don't they just shut up and buy it from you? Like, can we all just save a bunch of time? And the more like intelligent you are, the lower your EQ typically starts, right? I used to sell to doctors, and holy crap, they are some rough people to maintain relationships with, right? And you also don't want to show up and be like, you know what, I know everything, which has always been my path to greatness as a salesperson. I can remember like way back in like 1999, 2000, I was driving to work in my first retail job. It was at Old Navy. I was a seasonal help. And I pulled up and I'm eating my Jack in the Box in the morning before I go in and work my shift. And there's this Home Depot commercial on there. And this guy says, my philosophy to sales is I'm going to know the product better than anybody else. And I remember hearing that and I was like, you know what? That's me. That's me. That's going to be me always. So fast forward when I'm actually interviewing for this B2B role of selling to doctors, and my boss goes, hey, what makes you different? I said, no one's going to know it better than me. And he goes, okay, so I get the role. You know who knows it better than me? All of those surgeons. Every one of them. And you know who doesn't want to hear anything about how smart I am or how much I know about these nuts and bolts and screws in human anatomy? These surgeons that have got exponentially more experience and knowledge than I do. And it struggled. And a big part of that struggle was because I was working for someone who is kind of like a winger of a salesperson, right? They're very instinctual, they're very extroverted, they just kind of figure it out as they're going along. I can't work that way. And that was when I started to realize maybe I'm not the right fit for this. Maybe I'm just not supposed to be a salesperson. And thankfully, through some connections and some friends, I found personality assessments and a really great coach. And he really showed me that there's a whole other path to this. And it's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being a really great listener. It's about really modulating that conversation to the person that you're speaking to, so that way you can be heard the right way. And that was the beginning of all the change. That was 10 years ago. So I've been on that path ever since.
I love that. So a couple of jumping off points. You said when you walk in the room and you're the most intelligent person in the room, and that's the typical MSP and MSSP.
Absolutely.
They walk in and they're not, they do skip discovery because they think discovery is for them. I'm actually talking about that at IT Nation Secure, why discovery is not for you, the salesperson. It's really for the prospect to help them discover issues and where they're underserved. But if you skip discovery because you walk in and you're like, I've got the best thing, I know exactly what you need and what I have is the best solution. That may be true. You may know exactly what the problem is. You may have the best solution, but you'll never make the sale if you don't help the prospect realize that they have a problem and that your solution is best. So I love that around skipping the discovery process. So
isn't it like AA meetings? You have to identify you have the problem before you can solve the problem, and that's the therapist mentality. It's the dead on truth. And actually, John, what you said, and I think this is a differentiator is. You went to talk to doctors, right? And they have a certain way of doing things. First, you have to know your audience, right? You have to know who the type, we all fall into a bucket of some sort. And our career usually dictates what our personality typically is to a degree, right? Engineers become engineers, doctors become doctors. And you know, within a percentage of a fraction of whatever that they're going to be similar to this personality, whatever that is. So I think first identifying the persona or personality type that you're going to talk to. Second is, again, knowing I never talk about what do you sell. I ask, how do you sell it? That's what I really want to know. And if you focus on the how you sell it, you don't get into the nitty gritty and you don't get in the weeds. And if you look at a sales trajectory, when a person starts in sales, that they're flatlined, right, first day, and they start learning, they start creeping up and up and up and up and up. They peak, they're doing really well, crushing it, right, and then you start seeing them dip. Every person does. Every person dips. Now it's a matter of how far you're going to dip. And the reason why that happens is because they become overeducated. And they start talking about everything they shouldn't talk about. The smart ones realize that they did that and like, holy crap, let me stop. And they go and they're back up. The other ones drop down. And I think that's the problem you have with people that are engineer type or technical type. They don't ever even get here. They're always going here because they're wowing them with their wisdom of technology, which means absolutely nothing to the average person.
Or they're not comfortable even putting on the persona of being less smart about their thing, because not being able to troubleshoot or not being able to fix a problem impacts them from a mindset. They are less than if they're not the smartest person in the room. So they can't even put on that persona artificially because it demeans who they are. It demeans how they feel about themselves.
Right. Which they need to and that's back to identifying what you are. What's your value add? What's your proposition? What are you doing?
Yes.
I mean, are you here to sell me a firewall or are you here to sell me a service?
Yes.
A complete service. And once you do that, I think that's the challenge we've seen for years in the MSP space is that they, before they knew what the hell they even were, and now they defined what they are, is now getting to the point of realizing that they're supposed to be the trusted technology partner. They're supposed to be the CIO or CTO or the director of technology, whatever the company wants to call them. They should be at the executive table.
So that is hinting at something we were chatting about in the green room, which is knowing your swim lane and understanding exactly what you are doing for the client. So you are that technology provider. You're the trusted advisor. You're taking care of all things related to security and growth for the end user company. And that's a completely different persona than, well, I'm the tech guy that fixes your firewall when it breaks or does a hot swap or what have you. So, John, I know you've got kind of been through this journey of defining your swim lane and figuring out that a marketing message to everyone is a marketing message to no one. Can
Absolutely.
you share a little bit about that journey? Because I think that'd be helpful for MSPs to hear from a completely different industry. I think there's going to be a few aha moments just in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to something that Sean said in the beginning, like founders fundamentally have to sell very differently than the salespeople that they eventually go on to hire, right? Because a founder oftentimes is selling themselves, whereas the salesperson is actually on the hook to sell the product or service, right? And founders instinctually, because they put in reps, they do lots of repetitions, they have lots of conversations, right? They have the curse of knowledge as well, kind of speaking to that kind of dip in their performance because they know too much, right? And so one of the things that I'm doing that for myself, right? Whenever I first launched this business, I wasn't here to be a sales coach. Like I know some really great sales coaches, and I wanted nothing really to do with that lane. I just wanted to help people from the technical side. So I was just a CRM consultant, and come to find out, a lot of how I use a CRM is tied to how I think about selling and how to manage relationships and pipelines. So whenever COVID came along, I knew a bunch of really great salespeople that had been laid off, and so we started doing placements. And for the first time, people were like, "Well, John, I want someone who sells like you." And I'm like, "Oh, well, no one's ever asked me for that before because I'm normally the problem child, right? I ask too many questions. It has to make sense, and I'm not just going to go do a bunch of busy work for the sake of doing busy work because you don't want to do it." And so that was when the book and the methodology and everything came from, because people were asking me about this. And while I'd spent a lot of time in coaching in a very popular lane, I didn't do everything. And with the reps and my path through it, the way that I internalized some of that technique comes from a fundamentally different place, right? So it wasn't just about getting the deal done. It was about looking for clarity. It was about making sure that I'm on the same page. It's about making sure that I'm not trying to read your mind, because as much as I would love to have that ability, I don't actually have it. So as a salesperson, slowing down is something that I really needed to do. So over this path, you know, coaching and placing and developing salespeople, what I found is that of those lanes, the people that I have the best outcomes with are the actual entrepreneurs who want to do it the right way, but haven't ever thought of themselves as salespeople. Like these are the people that have the strongest reaction to the book, my course, my coaching. So why am I trying to blow it out and be a sales coach to everybody who wants sales coaching, right? When I hate when someone gets told that they have to come to sales coaching because they're not closing enough, and then that person shows up and they're not open to anything we're talking about here. They're just kind of running out the clock. So, doing that deep work of who do we have the best outcomes with, who do I struggle with, who do I want to spend more time with, it's an iterative process. You have to keep going through it, because I think there's always clarity when you do it regularly. You think you're like, I'm finally clear. I got it all figured out. I know exactly my lane. And then give it 6 months. You will have find some things to further clarify that lane and make it just a little bit tighter. So I don't think it ever really ends. I'm excited to get through this rep because we're challenging ourselves like pretty deeply on like why we want to work in this space. And so it's fun. It also feels like I'm bumping into the walls, but it's part of the process.
And I like that you said it's work. And that's why so many other people will not do it, because it is work and it's difficult and it requires internal, soul searching, and who is it that I want to show up as, and what happens when I hit a ceiling? What's that next step? And is that really the next step that I want? And who do I enjoy working with? And oh no, if I can't help everyone, are there going to be enough people that I can help to meet my personal goals and my business goals, etc. So, so I want to park a little bit on the problem child thing, because I feel like we're all in the right room. We're going to talk about the problem child in just a second. But if you're just now joining us, we're chatting with John Small Mountain. Sean and I are here. We're talking also about my event that's coming up in June 13 and 14. It's in Orlando. If you do not have your ticket, please get a ticket soon. The seats are going quickly. I've already had a conversation with the event coordinator. We have packed as many seats into this room as we can, unless you want to sit backwards, which I always hate that. Then you have to turn your chair around and you don't have a table in front of you, and it's awful. Go ahead.
I have a story for you. Okay, so
good,
a couple of years ago, I'm going to a sales conference also in Orlando. And we get there and they've got these big round roundtables. This is like a 12 or 1,500 person event. It was pretty huge. And this one guy, like super savvy sales leader, he runs to the table they're all going to sit at, and he picks the seat facing away from the stage. And I was like, well, that's an odd thing, because I knew him to be an I personality type, and all those things around eyes, and we'll talk more about this at your event. But he goes, if I can see them, I can't focus on anything they're saying. So I purposefully have to put my back to them so that way I can focus on the notes that I want to take. And this blew me away. I was like, man, talk about a person who is hyper aware of themselves. Like, they know exactly why they're here and what they're trying to do, and they're being very intentional. And so to that point, maybe there's some people that are coming to this thing that want to sit backwards so that way they can focus on the message and their note taking and stuff. That completely stunned me, because before that person said that, it never even would have, like, I would have been like, I don't want to sit backwards. I don't think anybody wants to sit back. Why do we even have circular tables at these events? So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I love the level of introspection that shows, because I think that's one of my superpowers, is that I can look at my sales calls and really dig in and say, how did I show up for that person, and why did that sales call not go as well as that one did? What made that one phenomenal? And that level of analysis and level of knowing myself has really served me well. There have also been times where it did not serve me so well. So I do want to talk about the problem child. And so
I don't agree with the problem child. I'm more of a princess. That's how I decide this right away. And I literally tell every entrepreneur that I'm a princess. I'm high maintenance. But John, what you were going through, I love the CRM piece. You have to be high maintenance at first, because there is a level of expectation that's to occur later. You have to produce results. So if I don't get it out of the way now, I'm never going to get this for you later. So I have to be high maintenance, because you as the entrepreneur CEO, you have the longevity of high maintenance. Literally, you've been high maintenance for the last 5 years until I met you, and you're going to be high maintenance for the next 10 years while you still run your business. Yeah. It's just not all front. Like, I'm all upfront high maintenance, but it's the expectation. And like, literally, one of my employers at one point, he used to send me packages like for things I needed, and it would say Princess Lardo on it. Like, it didn't say Sean, it said Princess. So he understood, but I like that you did this with the CRM piece, because I think CRMs are great because you're talking about sales operations and sales enablement, and you look for the path of least resistance for data management and input, right? And that typically will help you determine your sales process too, right? And so I'm just curious too, when you were doing the whole Salesforce thing and CRM pieces, did you find it to be better to use a CRM like Salesforce because it's so robust, or did you find it being a detriment sometimes?
So I really think it depends upon the team and how you're getting it done and the stage of growth that you're in, right? I never really actually went too far down the Salesforce lane, because I know there's a bunch of really smart people that play in that lane. And I was more focused. I love small business. I love entrepreneurs. I love like helping people bring some system to the chaos that is in their head. And so the ones that I really like are Pipedrive. I'm a Pipedrive partner. I'm in their network. Go High Level is one that I've been playing with a lot here recently. Active Campaign. We're doing a HubSpot build for one of my clients right now and building out their whole top of funnel. And so it's much more about, what are you trying to get done, right? Because if you're sales led, you don't probably need HubSpot, right? Because you're going to be out there pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, cold calling, doing it old fashioned ways, and that's totally fine. If you are marketing led, you're doing lots of MQLs and SQLs and warm ups and everything else like that, Pipedrive is probably not a great fit for you, right? So really kind of getting in, understanding how do they want to get it done, and then build their systems and processes to kind of match their path that makes sense for them is really the goal.
I like that. So one more thing. I'm sorry, Jennifer.
Sure.
I'm totally back to cats and herding. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So would you say, like, something I started to address some years back with some of them was, I feel like there's a delineation between the marketing and sales, as you already established, but also there's that middle road of that BDR concept, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, depending on your approach to your whatever kind of business you are and whatever your audience is, will change what those roles look like, right? So, I am not a big fan of cold calls. I'm not a big fan. I've already been down that route. I've even been at one point in my life, I was doing door-to-door office supply sales. I think everybody's tried that once, right? And top up even weird, right? It's like you walk into a business like, oh, here it comes, But do you find that you use that would determine if you have all three areas, Would that work in HubSpot? Would that work in Pipedrive? Where does that work then? Where does that reside?
So first of all, I need to say that I'm a huge fan of marketing, right? And I know there's a big stigma in lots of organizations between sales and marketing, but one of my favorite lines is from this guy named Nicholas Thickett, and he's one of the hosts of the B2B Power Hour, right? And he's a salesperson, he's friends with a marketer, and they're just kind of sharing upskilling. And he says that the difference between salespeople who have good quality of life, meaning that they can turn it off and shut it down and go like be a human and be a parent and a partner and everything else, is marketing. Because if you don't have marketing, you're on that grind for forever. And I believe that. Now, I think there's a lot to be said around the BDR function, and I love the discussion about should they report to marketing or should they be, more sales driven, because I think I think they need to be trained like salespeople, but I think they need to think like marketers in the fact of like, let's see if people are resonating with these talking points in these cold calls and this cold outreach, because if not, that is where you need to fix the thing, right? Because you can't close a bad deal, right? Like you shouldn't be closing bad deals. You shouldn't be forcing fits. You shouldn't be selling on the roadmap. You shouldn't be doing these things that people do because they're trying to hit goal. But it starts, that first stage is that outreach. How do you make someone aware of who you are and the fact that they could maybe make an improvement on how they're doing something internally right now? And it's hard because no one wants to admit to a salesperson that they're doing it the bad way, right? That there's room to improve. Right. And then when there's technical and there's a technical knowledge gap, now we have two big gaps to overcome. One, the technical stigma, because I know more about tech than you do in some of these conversations. And then also I'm a salesperson. So now I'm trying to sell you something you don't want, and I'm talking about it at a level that you're not comfortable with. So how can we expect that to be a really great, comfortable conversation for the buyer? It's not the majority of the time. So we have to go further, kind of taking the scenic route on our conversations and discovery. How is this impacting the other people on your team? What happens if you don't make this kind of change, as opposed to assuming, what, they want this, let's go, and like we're so excited to create a proposal and ship it out the door, and then we're in chasing mode.
Right.
Did they ever actually say they have a problem? Because if not, you're not ready.
But aren't they all one the same? So going back to your marketing thing, if you're a good salesperson and you're not looking to be just transactional, you're creating the relationship piece, right? Which requires a marketing effort regardless. Not marketing maybe based off of the original term of marketing, but marketing has changed. And we've been saying for the last, I love that for like the last 30 years, we've been talking about the sales journey's changed. The clients have changed. No, it's always been different. It's not really ever been different either, though, at the same time, because everybody used to investigate. So more or less, back to the humanized piece, if you're a sales rep, you don't need marketing to market. You create relationships, you go on, use social media, use the things that are fun. And even before social media existed, you sign up at the Chamber of Commerce and you go to events.
Absolutely.
And you're socializing yourself, because the first thing you do is you build your own brand. And then the company reaps the benefit.
I love that. We talk a lot on the marketing side about know, like, and trust. And if marketing and sales are two sides of the same coin, I wish we would talk more about know, like, and trust on the sales side. And so what I'm hearing both of you say is when you're speaking over the head of your prospect, if you're making assumptions, if you're not, whatever the technique is, making micro commitments or tie downs or whatever technique you want to use to make sure, do we really have a problem? And is today the day we need to solve this? And what happens if we don't solve it? That's all about building that relationship and creating trust. Like, I don't want to sell you something you don't think you need, or that maybe you don't need, maybe I'm wrong. To have that level of emotional intelligence is definitely going to build that trust. And then it's also going to be building that know. So that know, like, and trust is so needed in the sales conversation. And there's not a lot of talk about that on sales. There's a lot of talk about that on the marketing side.
Yeah. And I think there's a whole lot of, one of the things that I talk about is the marketing norm creates the sales norm. Okay. So you have to be thoughtful with your outreach and what are the talking points, right? If you're sending DMs to people and you're saying, hey, we're giving away free strategy calls to share some of the best practices. If that sales rep just shows up and it's a blatant product push, they're not getting what they signed up for, right? The expectation has not fundamentally been met. And now you want them to show up to a second call? Why would they put themselves through that? It doesn't make any sense. So I think there's room for I think marketing people need to be listening to sales calls, right? I think salespeople need to be part of like the marketing iteration. Hey, we were talking about it this way. This is how we're going to talk about it because we think that this is going to create the change necessary. Like, I love when a marketing message is so tight and speaks to just one audience and it's just white noise to everybody else, not polarizing or making somebody else the enemy, but just white noise to them. Like, to me, that's the hallmark of really great marketing, as opposed to, do you want to grow or do you want to like fail in a dumpster fire? Like, no one wants to be part of those conversations. So being able to show up and ask really great questions, dial that conversation to their personality so that way you will actually be heard is just a thing that takes practice and reps. And in my opinion, the right sales culture as well. You don't have to be perfect. You're going to mess up. Most deals don't close. How do you not repeat yourself? How do you learn from this situation, improve in your next rep?
Love this. So if you're just joining us, we're chatting with John Smallmountain. He is coming to my event in Orlando, June 13 and 14. You've got the link right below. Make sure you get your ticket. We only have so many seats in the room, although we may take John's advice and put a couple of seats backwards for those of you who don't want to look at the stage and don't want to get distracted by the screens. But even so, the room is kept small on purpose. This is a very intimate workshop style 2-day event that is all about sales, marketing, a little bit of personal branding, a fair amount of operations as well. So that if you are in that $1 to $5 million range and you're an MSP committed to breaking through that $5 million glass ceiling, this is the event for you. So John, I want to piggyback on something you just said. I walked a client through this 10 days ago or so. They had siloed off marketing and sales, and the two were not speaking to each other. And I see this a lot where marketing had a certain number of MQLs and SQLs, like how many leads do we need to create every single month? And they were missing the mark. And so they brought me in to say, we need you to help our marketing team create more leads. And so one of my first questions was, okay, your goal is to set these appointments. What are these appointments? They're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, are they coffee meetings? Are they full-on risk assessments? And marketing's like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, so hold on a second, because your KPI is set meetings, and you don't even know what kind of meeting the sales department, like what is that introductory conversation? And I said, and then when they go on these introductory conversations, what are the pain points they're uncovering? What is the value to the end user? And yes, that comes up in the sales call, but you have to talk about that in the marketing, and that full circle wasn't happening. Like, we've created these, marketing is over here and sales is over here, and they never speak to one another. And then often, I mean, Sean, I'm sure you've been through this a time or two. They're almost at odds with each other, right?
Absolutely.
Like, sales is never getting what they need from marketing.
It's finger pointed. And how many times you have a conversation where it's like, hey, you didn't close that many deals this month. Well, our marketing leads suck.
Yes.
And then marketing says, no, they suck at the sales process. They don't call in time. And that's where transparency is important. Again, it's extremely important. You set a process, and that even goes back to even what you said before about should there be a process for marketing, but then also appointment setting, and then also sales. They're all different processes as far as I'm concerned, because there's a prospecting, there's a sales, and then there's the pre, so the MQL stage to the SQL to the actual once you're in the sales process. Because that's the only, as far as I'm concerned, it's the only negotiable piece is when somebody answers the phone, because it's only negotiable because whatever you're doing is based off of the expectations that they're able to adhere to. Like, oh, I can meet you on Tuesday. Oh, I will take time to talk to you. That's the only negotiating point until you come to a cost conversation, which possibly could be negotiable if you can't build value the right way. And that's a problem too. Poor you if you suck too bad and you can't build value. But anyway.
Okay, so I want to shift back. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. I want to shift back to this concept of emotional intelligence versus intelligence, like just having really solid understanding about the product that you're selling, the service that you're selling. How does an MSP, they walk in the room, they 100% know more than the prospect. So what's one or two really quick tactical pieces of advice that you can give to make sure that you're not turning the prospect off with your level of intelligence?
Great question. So a couple of things come to mind. The first one is, you have to be aware of yourself in the space you take up in a conversation, right? On Disc, I'm a C, which means that I'm a big nerdy developer type. I like process and form and consistency, and I like very clear expectations. I want to know where the rules of the box are. And whenever I found sales coaching, I was just like, oh my God, this is going to be a great. I don't have to try to be someone I'm not. And I was cutting out all the things that actually build trust in a conversation, right? Like slowing down, small talk, really understanding how they want to be talked to, and asking questions. So for C's, when I took another personality assessment a couple of years later, and the person was just looking over the results, and she goes, "Oh, how much do you hate being wrong?" And I'm like, "Oh, I hate being wrong," right? And this is normal for C personalities. We don't want to be construed as someone who doesn't have their knowledge. So the thing to remember is when asking questions doesn't actually make you look bad. It makes you look stronger when you're dealing with a prospect, right? So while it's easy to show up in a conversation and be like, are you let me think of a bad way to phrase this question. So you're just letting all this traffic in here, you're not doing any kind of filtering. That's a heavy question, right? And no one is going to want to admit that they're doing that badly, right? So how can you ask that same question in a more approachable way, really kind of thinking about tonality and cadence? So the first one is just ask questions. Questions allow them to self-discover. We were kind of talking about therapy before this thing, and how really great consultative selling sounds like a therapy session, because it does. Hey, is that really a problem? Yeah, that's really a problem. Guess what? They just labeled that a problem, and you don't have to. Your job is so much easier because you were able to build a conversation so that way they can admit that there's a gap and a challenge you might be able to help with, as opposed to showing up and being like, hold on, I got exactly what you need. It's in my pocket. Let me get it out and I'll show it to you. The other thing is telling little bitty stories, right? As opposed to showing up and getting lost in the technical nature of how this connects to that and the integrations and the API and the coding and everything necessary. Hey, if you had a magic wand, how would you like this to work? Let them tell you and let them lead that way. Ask questions along the way, but stories are huge because it really kind of bypasses a lot of the friction between the salesperson and the buyer. So lead with stories, tell little stories. Hey, when I was talking with someone else the other day, they said they were struggling with this. This sounds maybe somewhat similar. Is this relevant to you? No, not at all. Okay, cool. Wasn't sure. Where are you struggling? Right? Since I showed up and I missed the mark, I can then ask for some help and get it directly from the source, as opposed to continuously jumping from assumption to assumption to assumption and missing the mark more often than I hit. So, slowing down, asking lots of questions, because questions allow them to color in the picture as opposed to us having to do it. And then telling stories from your other conversations and really not dumbing them down, because I don't like that label, but making them approachable for whoever you're talking to.
Yeah,
Super,
translating them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can't they start saying, how are you? Hey, how are you? Let's start with that. I feel like that's the hardest thing for some reason, just to realize you're supposed to have a conversation first.
Absolutely.
We just call it what it is, which is a conversation before you start to determine if you're going to be friends.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, when I started on this path, I'm an introvert. And so I just wanted sales training so that I could get in and I could get to the heart of the matter. Let's get the brass tacks as fast as possible. There are some people that if you don't give them that small talk, no matter how great your product or service is, they feel like they can't trust you. And it's so deep in their bones that it's not even on their radar, is like, you know what, if you just talked a little bit more, I could get behind this. They just feel this friction and they don't really understand why. So they just opt out, so that small talk is super important. And we talk about using it to really understand how they want to be communicated to. Do they want those stories? Is it just ROI? Is it about the team and the people involved? Or is it just about the goals? When you can figure out how they want to be talked to and you can customize your conversation to those points, your life as a salesperson is so much easier.
I love that. And you didn't even know this, but I'm actually doing a whole session at my event on stories selling and how to take those stories and weave them into your sales process. And I love your tip about keeping the stories short. They don't need to be these 20-minute elaborate works of fiction. We're just talking about peppering in stories and analogies. In my mind, they go together. So
agreed.
Such a great conversation. John, Sean, thank you both for joining me. And neither one of you picked on the other one about your beards or the hair or the lack of hair. I mean, Sean's, go ahead, Sean. Go ahead. I gave you an in.
I just want to say, John looks like he should be playing an acoustic band, like guitar, at a coffee shop. And I just found him on Facebook, by the way, and his page, he absolutely should, or he's from that 70s show, either one.
This is what happens when your COVID look ends up being your best look, right? I never had a beard before COVID. I never had long hair before COVID. I'm prior service military. And so during COVID, I was struggling like everyone else. And I'm like, I wonder what happens if I just stop shaving, like I wasn't having to shave a whole lot. And then this beard grew out of my face, which was kind of like a big surprise to everybody in my family and all my friends.
I love it.
Not me. They were like, man, you need hair for your face. Like, cover that.
You need as much coverage as possible.
Can you grow it long enough that you can do a comb over your face like the eighth grade math teacher, like when I was head? Yeah, no. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you both for coming on, guys. If you do not have your ticket to my event, get your ticket soon. mspsalesrevolution.com/ultimate. It is the ultimate IT growth conference, and it is all about helping you break through that next level of success and beyond, creating a scalable marketing and sales system. It's in June. I hope to see you there. Again, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Absolutely. I agree.
John's
Take care.